Hello, everyone in the Social Selling Hour community. It is October 27th. You are joining us for episode number 24 here on this glorious day. We are glad you are joining us again. How are you doing this morning, Rachel? Or this afternoon?
I'm amazing. How's Vegas?
Vegas is good. I am actually, if you guys notice, there's not a board behind me or my Steeler terrible towel. I am at IBM Insight talking big data, analytics, social cloud, IBM Watson. I got a demo of this morning. So I am doing great. I can't think that you can ever say you're not doing great when we're in Vegas, but that's always a good rule of thumb. But as always, thank everybody for joining us on the Hangout on YouTube. And we are, of course, doing our Twitter chat as well, hashtag Social Selling Hour. And we are honored to have Jeff Sheehan here with us today to kind of talk a little bit about everything best practices, share his years of experience, and couldn't be more excited to have you on, Jeff. And give us a little bit of background about yourself and what you're working on.
Well, basically, thank you very much, Brian. Thank you, Rachel. Real pleasure to be here with you guys today. To everyone out there in the Twitter universe and the Google Plus Hangout universe, or whatever it might be. But basically, I've been in marketing sales for 30-something plus years. My last assignment, actually, last corporate assignment, was working for a company called Murata Electronics. And they manufacture the majority of the guts of cell phones. The preeminent supplier to mostly every handheld cell phone manufacturer and smartphone manufacturer out there. About a $9 billion Japanese company, 48,000 employees. I was in marketing sales for them. Was a global account manager for a large portion of my overall tenure with them. Traveled around the world as a 1.5 miler on Delta. Saw all areas of the world. It was a very fascinating job in that. And the last 5 years, I've been doing a lot of volunteer work in career ministry, teaching LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Google for the job search, consulting. Wrote a book called Hired, Past Employment in the Social Media Era, based upon what we and my co-author Al Smith had seen in the job search arena, and just doing a lot of different things in social media, marketing, and sales. So a potpourri, actually, of within each one of those areas. So it's a real pleasure, again, to be with you here today, and to shed my thoughts on social selling and where we're headed with it.
That's actually a perfect lead into the first question. I'm really curious to hear how you define social selling. I think me having a primarily marketing background, I have my own definition, but with your strong sales. To start it off, Jeff, what is social selling to you?
Okay, to me, really, social selling, tweet about this, is the use of social media tools really for increasing the likelihood of sales success. And nothing really more than that per se. It's just a way of increasing the ability to connect with people and to really interact with them and engage with them, and to further yourself along it. It's one thing I wanted to emphasize. It's that social selling is really not something that's revolutionary. It's more evolutionary. It's an evolution in the sales process. Social media has changed the sales process, but it hasn't. The basics still apply, whether you realize it or not. And I think that that's one thing that most people neglect, is that the basics still apply. And it really has helped as far as social selling, because of the fact that you have here now a potpourri of tools that you can use to further enhance the process for selling. Unlike before, where you had to make cold calls, you had to rely on others for a lot of information, or glean the information from books in the library, reference manuals, and what have you. Now you can find most of this information at your fingertips online. More importantly, and if you do this correctly with regard to social selling, it can be used as a very, very effective tool for not only customer acquisition, but nurturing the customer relationships that you have. And I think that's something that's so sadly neglected. And I'll talk about this further, where social selling tends to be so focused on customer acquisition and not enough on customer retention and loyalty. And
I like that. Jeff, that's well. I always say that you have to pay attention and treat the ones that are keeping your lights on and making your paycheck show up just as much as you attract the new ones. So I couldn't agree more.
Oh, absolutely. Now, I have some statistics to back that up. But the thing is, I want to emphasize, Brian and Rachel, that it is effective. for instance, there's a study that was done by Aberdeen Research that the salespeople who do employ it are 75% more likely to retain their quotas. There also the fact is that it's effective in that they have a 3.6 times greater chance of actually engaging with people and meeting the decision makers. It really helps facilitate that. If you make cold calls, it's all a numbers game. Whereas if you use social selling as part of the process, it helps reduce the number of times that you have to cold call. I still am a proponent of cold calling. I've done an awful lot of it during my career. It hasn't died, as some people would say, and also the salesperson hasn't died as well. And don't neglect that with regard to social selling. The salespeople still have to close the deals at the end of the day, except perhaps in a consumer setting, but definitely in a B2B, the salesperson has not become irrelevant. The position has changed somewhat. Hopefully you agree with that, Brian.
No, I couldn't agree more, and I think I love the statistics because it's kind of perfectly teamed up for me right now. I'm sitting at big data analytics conference, and they're talking about utilizing data and making strategic decisions with that. And I think that's partially what when we're talking about the better when someone's looking to make the better sales or where someone's gonna find the best time to spend their time. Because I think no matter where we are, you have to figure out where you're going to spend your time wisely. And I think sometimes people are assuming that if you're sitting there staring at a Twitter feed, that's not as valuable as someone sitting on a telephone. And staring at a Twitter feed is not something you should be doing all day, every day. But it is the value there and understanding, backing it up with data. Like I really do appreciate that. When you think about that, if you're getting over three times return on that time, I mean that's the data you have to go back and convince your leaders to understand. Hey, this is different than me having a phone in my hand, but this is my my return on my time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is that the buying process has changed. Yeah, because of the fact that the buyers out there are much more informed in this day and age. I mean, there's such a plethora of information out there on the internet that's available at their fingertips as well. So they really are very well informed as to what is going on. And the thing is, social selling helps to facilitate that as far as the salesperson is concerned, and being equally as informed about the overall buyers, about the buying process, and about what they have to share with the respective buyers as well. It really has revolutionized the ability to cope with all the changes that have taken place in the buying process in adjusting to the changes in the sales funnel as well. Social selling gives you the ability to reach any part of the sales funnel with regard to information in that, with content, and even face-to-face or telephone conversations, whatever else you might have to interject information into the sales funnel.
So I really like what you said at the beginning of question one, your answer, that social selling is an evolution, not a revolution. And along those lines, I was curious if you thought that we're evolving to more of a marketing-enabled sales process.
Yes and no. I think it's a combination of the two, to be quite honest with you. Again, as I said, the marketers are generally, I wouldn't say introverted, but they're not gregarious as perhaps salespeople are. So you're still going to have gregarious people out there that are that are closing deals for you. The marketers can help facilitate that and move the buyers further down the sales funnel. But it always, at the end of the day, particularly in B2B setting, it takes very skilled salespeople who are well informed to help close the deal, ensure that you have maximized your market share, that your pricing is holding up, and you're not giving away the store during the sales process. So it takes a unique individual, regardless of whether we're in a social setting environment or not. The salesperson and qualified salespeople are worth their weight in gold.
Well, and I think you said something interesting. I think off the beginning we were talking about it being a tool, and and I like to call your new book being called Hired, and I kind of like that you refer to social media as a tool to get hired, and I preach a lot about the importance of personal branding and building your digital footprint, and I think of social as a tool, and it's almost like we need a Swiss Army knife of skill sets today, right? Because it's not just this one tool or this just because it's the latest way you're going to communicate, you still communicated in the sales process previously. So all the other sales, the skills outside of just communication are still needed to close the deal on social. Social is just leveraging, or maybe enhancing one of your tools. And I think that is something that I think is often overlooked, or when someone embraces or quote unquote, tries out social selling, they either they don't go at it 100%, or they like do a half-assed attempt and then just blame their sales for failing on social, when really you're like, well, would you have done that exact same, would you have sent out 500 LinkedIn requests, in mails that were not personalized? So when you go to a business party, do you just throw your business cards in the middle of the floor and say good luck and walk out the door without any engagement? Like, I think that's an important thing to understand, the tool angle there. And I wanted to pull in a tweet that I thought was really good. Bill Jeffrey kind of threw in a stat, since we were dropping some data there, and he said 65% of consumers have bought a product they weren't intending to buy after reading a positive review. So I know that's not on our script, but what are your thoughts on that? I thought that's some really interesting data there.
Yes, if people, they tend to buy from reviews that are positive in that, and particularly from people that they know and trust. If they have friends out there or family that have written reviews and they're very positive about a product, then people will not hesitate generally to jump on that product and at least try it or whatever. The other thing, one thing I want to emphasize, Brian, is with regard to the salesperson. One of the things unique changes has been that listening has become ever more important as a sales skill, more so than it ever was in the past. You have to be a great listener, because of the fact that you want to pick up on the cues as to where in the sales process they are and what you can do to provide them with the information within that sales process, within the buying process, that's going to help initiate a sale.
No, I think you're right on. And Madison Jones had a great tweet that it made me giggle. So I was like, I gotta drop this one in there. It said, if you approach social selling like fishing with bait, you're doing it wrong. It's not catch and release. It's attract and maintain. And that's the first time I've heard that said, and I think that's kind of spot on there. Just from the, like you said, it's the not only current customers that we have today, but upselling and the ability that if you're creating this relationships. I know before we were having a little chat that I finally got to meet Tamara, one of our previous guests, in person, and she stresses the importance of relationships and trust in the sales process, in any closing agreement. And I think it didn't take us but 10 minutes into this chat today, and we've said trust, relationships, current customers. So I think that's the listening to not only your current customers, but listening for what feedback maybe that they're not saying, not just what you're, that's to me is a big trend on what we're doing, as sales across the board.
Yeah, the other thing it does, Brian, is it facilitates homework preparation for face-to-face meetings and interaction with the buyer. It's unlike anything we ever had in the past with regard to tools. I mean, you're armed with so much information that you can glean from the various sources within social media, so that when you go to visit with someone that's a prospective buyer, you really know an awful lot about them and what their interests are and how you can approach them, unlike the past where you had to make a cold call and then learn the information afterwards by looking at what was on the wall or on the desk, what have you. Now you're onto the teeth with regard to information about that person that you're going to be sitting across from face to face.
So what are your thoughts on, what if I flip that or reverse? From a salesperson's perspective, all of that data and information about them is available as well. So when you're going to do that face-to-face now, what are your thoughts like on I know with the book and being these new employees or getting hired, how does a salesperson have to change, or maybe their thought process has to be like, hey, if I know all this information by simply doing a little bit of research or a little bit of social listening, they probably know the same amount about me. Like, how does that mindset change?
No, I think you're right in a lot of cases. However, if you look at the procurement people, the buyers and that, particularly in the B2B space, a lot of them are they're doing the jobs now of 2 or 3 people, what 2 or 3 people years ago used to do. So their time for researching the salespeople and that is probably somewhat limited. You'd be surprised. They're more concerned with what they have to buy, what the price is for the items that they're buying, and other factors. And what the cost of ownership for the material that they're buying will be, and not so much really focusing in on the salespeople per se. So they're onto the hilt with regards to information about the firm, but they probably have not done as much homework on the salespeople as you would think. It's just very, very difficult from a time perspective because they just, they're working their tails off. The other thing, Brian, I wanted to stress, and Rachel, is the benefits. It helps, social selling helps lower costs, increases productivity, and ensures higher close ratios, which is very, very beneficial to companies. So you really want to, tie in as much as you possibly can with regard to social selling. And one of the things that I've found, I've asked this question multiple times, is how many people or how many companies are actually using social selling? And to this, even though it's been around for a while now, it's not being embraced by a lot of companies. Is that what you're seeing, Brian? Brian?
Sorry, I was talking to the mute button. The mute button was not agreeing. No, actually, I think that's interesting. And actually, Rachel, from a, Rachel's, I think you have a unique perspective just from being a listener with a social selling software and a tool. How do you guys handle that, or what experience have you run into that from like a company that either is not embracing it, or maybe they're still looking for a tool before they think about the philosophy?
It's, in my experience, it's definitely an uphill climb. And actually, there's a tweet I just saw from John Golden. He said salespeople need to become micro-marketers, and marketers need to adopt some of the one-to-one tactics of sales. And I think that really plays nicely to the greater need for sales and marketing alignment. And in my experience, my last few companies, embracing social selling was not a high priority. For a lot of the individual salespeople, there's a huge learning curve with learning the unique platforms and the nuances of communicating online. And then again, just commonly C-level hasn't offered the support needed. So I would roughly guess that maybe 15% of salespeople out there are leveraging social selling techniques.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the other thing is I don't think they feel comfortable with it. And furthermore, most companies do not train their salespeople on how to use it. It's unbelievable how many companies I've seen out there that the salespeople really they don't have any clue how to use these tools. So.
No, but I mean, I think salespeople might need to take more ownership. And instead of blaming the company that I wasn't educated, the data out there is undeniable. So I know I'm always reading sales blogs, and it's a very common, discussed topic. So I think salespeople know they need to get social, and they just need to start.
Well, yeah, I think I would agree with you on that. The other thing I wanted to emphasize is beware of the hype. Again, it's not a panacea. There's still basic fundamentals that play into the overall marketing and sales process. So beware of the hype. There's certainly an abundance of it out there. So,
and that's really where this chat came from. And if we had a panel with 3 of our previous guests, with Barb, Dave Stein, and John Golden a couple weeks ago, and that was really the theme of our conversation, was that it's not the one-all be-all. And me being at this event, it's funny because big data, analytics, cloud, social in general, social selling, I think they're all kind of facing the same dilemma where people all either are afraid of it and think it's all or nothing, or they kind of look at certain things and say, like, I'm not sold on it, or there's so much hype, they say, I want to do it, they have no idea why. And I think that we have to be able to understand the why before you go do it. So, like, if you are going to your customers and you're not well armed and you don't have all the data to make the sale because you should have done social research, that makes sense. But if you're doing, I think Dave Stein had said that he had been involved in 2 really large enterprise sales that never touched anything from social because the client wasn't on social, that it just didn't have that need. So I think there's, like you said, not only the hype, but I think you have to start with the why. Do I really need social selling, and why?
Yes. So do you want to move on to question 2 now, Rachel?
Sure. Let me put my...
So question 2 there, we have, why is the current emphasis on social selling and social media so wrong? So I think we are kind of just highlighting that with some of the things with training and the buzz. But I would, could you extend that to the fact that, what elements of are they emphasizing on wrong? Is it the tool? Are they worried about that? Like, where do you see the emphasis being placed?
Well, one thing, the fact is they rely on the social selling, but there's no emphasis really. They're not paying attention to the basics of business. The 4 Ps or the 9 Ps that I've used in some of my blog posts. where it's very, very critical that you pay attention to the fundamentals of business. Social selling is only as good as the products and services that you represent, and you have to realize that. It's not really, like I alluded to earlier, not a panacea. And you still have to rely on consultative selling and integrated marketing and sales to close the entire loop. Social selling is just one element of the overall process. The other thing is that social selling and the whole thing with regard to content marketing and that is people fail to recognize that although we've moved into a tools-based society in a lot of respects, business is still a contact sport. People buy from those they know, like, and trust. And it's very, very critical you remember that as part of the overall process. And could have the greatest thing since sliced bread, but if you don't recognize that the personalities involved and the relationships you develop, it's all for naught. The other thing I want to emphasize with regard to social selling in the whole arena with regard to social media in general is that it's all based so much on customer acquisition and not taking care of existing customers. And it's really a pet peeve of mine when I talk at various conferences and emphasize that. Take care of your current customers. Take care of developing relationships with them. And also, don't fall back and try to do everything through content marketing. It's just not, content marketing fills a need in that, but you need to use these tools to build real relationships with people. As you alluded to, the relationship you built with Tamara, Brian.
No, yeah, I think that's interesting. I'm curious to your thoughts on this. And we were prepping for one of our future guests, and we had this discussion. And I thought it was an interesting view. Is that there's the content marketing element, there's the social element, but there's also the element of if you want to prove your value. I always use the hashtag screenshot awesomeness because it's just a way of building that story of that you're providing value. But there needs to be a little bit of an element of having a digital background, so like understanding SEO or understanding some kind of social analytics, because if you want to prove that the content you're creating is actually valuable and being consumed, you have to be able to build links or build that element. I think that might be an area where it's the sales team working very closely with a marketing team, or in the one case where our one of our future guests was talking about, he was like almost merging the two teams together so that you're sharing all of that insights and skill sets. What are your thoughts there on like the element of analyzing social selling, because you almost need those digital skills?
Yes, correct. People should be trained in that in the respective disciplines as far as the tools are concerned, and having that skill set is becoming very, very important. But again, remember, tying all this back into existing customer base and recognizing that the things that you have are tools, like content marketing. It's my favorite saying is content marketing is not king, but the customer is. So how do you tie those things together to really benefit your customer? And then what you want to do is use these things and wow the customer. I mean, if you look at a lot of companies, and one of the things I use as an example is Ritz-Carlton. I've stayed at Ritz-Carlton a number of times, and basically they do a great job of wowing existing customers. They relied very little on social selling or social media up until recently for their overall management and engagement with customers. They have such a formidable brand, such a very, very strong brand that they've been able to do so. The other thing is, with regard to this, is the profitability with regard to the existing customers versus future customers in acquisition mode. 80% of the profits in that are going to come from 20% of your customers. So anyone who has a focus entirely with social selling with regard to acquisition, not taking their current customers, is foolish, because the profits are going to suffer and the business is going to suffer.
I'm curious. So in full disclosure, so I'm on the digital advisory board for the Omni Hotel series, and they've been very. I stay at Ritz, and I was staying. Plenty of Marriotts and Ritz, and for them, they reached out and built this digital strategy board, not because their current business is suffering and not because they felt they needed to really embrace social for their current business, but they really want to target the millennial generation, and they really want to go after, because they believe their hotel series, very much like Ritz-Carlton, is not it's above a Marriott or a Hilton as far as a benchmark, and for them, they thought of social kind of being that way of doing it, but they realized quickly that it wasn't really a millennial generation. It's more of the connected generation of people. Or so when we think of that, and I know Ritz-Carlton now is doing a little bit more social, a little bit more digital. Is that also a trend that you believe is kind of going across the board, that maybe the companies that start researching social for social selling, but it doesn't mean something you have to be using today, but the customers of tomorrow are going to be, I mean, the truth is that they're more connected and more educated than they were a couple of years ago without the internet, without social.
You're absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, I had this discussion with the VP of Public Relations for Ritz-Carlton, and they're trying to reach the connected generation, and really social media and social selling really helps enable that. But they haven't neglected their current customer base. Go ahead, Rachel. The other thing is, with regard to this, and again, I focus on the customer. I think it's so critical because the 5% increase in the customer retention can increase the profitability of a company by 75%. So let's not overlook these things with regard to the whole social selling process.
No, I think you're right. I think actually, the blog post that I wrote that has been like probably the most successful for me recently, which I wasn't surprised about, but I kind of wrote about the philosophy of social business being about creating new customer experiences, not about all of these other things that we kind of focus on. I think of social selling being the same one, where we're talking about the customer. It's listening to the customer. It's having conversations, building a relationship with the customer. And if you're not doing that or taking that feedback or adapting those things, social selling has no chance, because you're just using it as another pipeline to spam them more useless marketing material and not build a relationship. It's going to fail just like it did when you spam them, at a live event. I think that's something that, unfortunately, these companies that are failing at social business and social selling are, rather than embracing the customer, and it's not Burger King, customer doesn't have to be right all the time, but for the most part, you have to listen to the customer, because a business with no customers, doesn't matter if you're good at social selling or social business, you won't be a business long.
Right, correct. I totally agree. Now, want to move on to question 3 then, Rachel?
Yes, it's a nice lead-in. So it sounds like it's an extreme battle to launch an effective social selling program. So how do you recommend to your clients so it sticks?
I think the first thing, and this gets back to basic marketing per se, is conduct an audit of the business. Where's the existing business, and where are your leads coming from with regard to your overall business per se? And then use that as a basis, a foundation for making the determination as to how you're going to move forward. And then once you've done that, is you really need to define what your goals and objectives are with regard to your social selling process. To just go out there and blindly start implementing a social selling program without really properly defining your goals and objectives is foolish. You're not going to achieve a significant return. You really need to define your goals and objectives, have them in writing, and utilize them accordingly as part of the overall general direction of the business itself. And then more importantly, associated with this is how do you define success in the whole social selling process? Because for each particular company, it's going to be different. Is it going to be number of new leads? Is it going to be new relationships? How many points you put on the board? And I contend at the end of the day, it really, the amount of revenue that you generate as a result of the process is what's most critical. Because without revenues, then your whole business will suffer. And you will not.
And I think that's a great, you highlighted a couple of things there where it's like, how do you define a success? And I know that, from cloud deployments to social to pretty much any of these elements, the companies that are not defining success, not building a strategy, not having clear defined new goals, and also not kind of aligning those with your business goals. Like, I think that's like a major mistake we see today, is that they're creating content marketing strategies to enable sales, but those content marketing strategies, I know Rachel even has a blog post on this about, like, if you're going to use vanity metrics or you're going to create content, like, stop doing it for content's sake and create content that is creating conversations and comments. And Rachel, elaborate a little bit more on your thoughts on that, because I think that is really important when we're talking strategy and goals for social selling as a whole.
Well, I think ultimately it comes down to analyzing your success from some really basic metrics. and they're not the vanity metrics that people assume is successful. So if you look at a blog post and you see that it's been, tweeted 200 times, 50 LinkedIn shares, and 12 Google Plus, that really means nothing. Because if you go to Google Analytics and you look that their time on page was under a minute, guaranteed nobody has actually read that content. So then what was achieved? How are you going to bring in more sales if no one's reading what you're writing? So I think people really need to take a step back and, like you said, Jeff, audit their customer base, work out what their customers want, what was successful in the past, and use that as a foundation for their content marketing strategies.
Right, and then the other thing is you really need to define your target audience, the ponds that you're going to fish in, and the message that will be utilized for each one, your target audience and the individuals within the target audience. Because you might have different buyers, different individuals at different stages of the buying cycle and that, also your product life cycle and the customer cycle as well. So you need to make sure that your content, everything you're doing with regard to the whole social selling process is not a one-size-fits-all, but is personalized. It really focuses on the needs of the respective clients and customers at each stage of the process.
So when you're helping a company implement a new social selling campaign, what metrics do you have them track? I know cold calling, I guess you could say that the metrics are quite easy, but we all know that activity does not necessarily equal productivity. And the same can be said with what people do on social networks. Just favoriting, retweeting is probably not going to do a whole lot of good. It's, soliciting conversation and carrying on those conversations. So what are the best metrics to track?
I mean, like a number of appointments you're able to get with the people, the revenue that you generated, the market share that you've actually been able to, have you increased your market share, have you increased your revenues, and those are some of the criteria that I think you really should employ with regard to the whole social process.
Well, what do you think? I mean, so I talked about, I focus when I'm working with the influencers, and I talk about influencers being in touch with the community so they can understand the community's, almost path to decision making. What about like reverse engineering how a sale is made so that you can document those steps across? Like, is that happening enough today where someone says, well, we made this sale and it had nothing to do with social selling, but if you look back, there was 13 touch points, they downloaded 2 PDFs, and this person actually, their rapport with the company was because these things happened on social. Is that something that you think is happening enough, or how do we make that?
No, Brian, I don't think it's happening enough. I don't think that really a lot of companies sit down and dissect the whole entire sales process and look at the various points within that process and what are they going to do at each one of the stages with regard to marketing and with sales, and what kind of content to employ, how do they nurture each one of those points along the sales pipeline to actually facilitate a marketing sales pipeline to actually, at the end of the day, result in market share gains or increase in revenues for the respective companies.
So I know we're on question 4 here, and I think I'm going to kind of rephrase the question because I think we hit part of it, but I wanted to kind of hit something on here. How can we make sales teams more, or even the salesperson, better equipped to create content of value compared to what, I think a lot of times when someone says, well, content's king, and since you're going to do social selling, you have to create content, and they just create content for content's sake. Like, what are some things that we can do that utilizes content marketing that actually enhances the sales process rather than just being another checkbox that we try to hit?
Well, I think what you need to do, I just sent out a tweet on this, is what's in it for them? What problem are you solving? What pain point are you addressing with regard to the customer or prospect that you're trying to reach? And try to personalize each one of those messages that you have of the content so that addresses those concerns. That is key for success. Because if you just throw a bunch of messages out there, people are going to ignore them. Everyone's inundated with information, with content. And if it's not really relevant, they're not going to look at it. They don't have time. They really have to tailor your messages and personalize them for the needs of the respective end customer or prospect.
So can you have a successful social selling program without content marketing?
Yes. Well, it depends upon the situation. Again, content marketing, and social selling and content marketing, it all depends upon the customer that you're going after, where they are in the buying cycle, the relationships you've already built with them. So those are factors you have to look at when you're trying to make a determination of how you approach each and every prospect or customer.
So for you personally, what tools do you use and what tools do you suggest for people to use when they're social selling?
Again, the two tools that I love are Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter, from a standpoint of, gives you the ability to connect with people who would be impossible to connect with, who would have been impossible to connect with in the past. If you follow them, retweet them, engage with them, then in all likelihood you'll develop a relationship with them that you could then take over to LinkedIn, connect with them accordingly, then have a phone call with them, and email exchange, phone calls, and then face-to-face. As Brian alluded to today, meeting last night with Tamara, that would not have been possible without social media. And I've had numerous instances where that has occurred as a result of the use of Twitter, LinkedIn, for generating leads and relationships with individuals. But you can't, again, just rely on the tools. You have to take it further and develop those hardcore, solid relationships with the individuals. Or otherwise, like anything, if you just have a number of contacts out there, the relationships will tend to be tenuous and will really not buy you anything.
So I'm not sure I agree that Twitter and LinkedIn are tools. Maybe with the exception of LinkedIn, because they do have a rather complex back end where you can generate lists and there's a lot of functionality there. But I think those are networks that you then use tools to identify prospects and start engaging with. Tools such as Hootsuite or Socito, depending on if you're prospecting or just looking to purely engage. Agree or disagree?
I think it's a combination of both. They're tools for reaching people. They're also networks unto themselves. But they give you, within LinkedIn itself, you have tools like the advanced search capabilities that can allow you, from an outbound marketing perspective, to actually focus in on your target market. Within LinkedIn, within Twitter, you can use some of the tools there that are out there to actually find prospects and for lead generation within that. So they become, you help build a network in that through using these tools within Twitter and LinkedIn themselves.
Welcome back, Brian. We're discussing tools that are great for social selling.
No, yeah, I thought that was good. I think one of the ones I think is underrated, and I will throw this in there based on we were talking about Tamara, and I was in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, and I checked in on Foursquare using proximity on my location, and someone that I was connected with, but I wouldn't say I was. I didn't let them know I was going to be in town. I ended up having 3 business meetings because they were on Foursquare, and on their app it actually popped up and said someone checked in nearby, and so she texted me and said, "Hey, you're in San Francisco. Did you just get off the train?" And I literally I turned around 360 and was like, "Is someone watching me? Like, what's going on here?" And I texted back and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here." She's like, "Walk 1 block and make a right, and you're at our home office." I ended up walking up the stairs, walking in the home office, met with the CEO of the company, and that would have never happened. I wouldn't even have known that she was there or even had the initial conversation if it wasn't for being connected. So those kind of things, like if I didn't have location services or if she didn't have her, I thought she did a great job as an account executive to not only take advantage of that, to jump on it immediately. That was there's a difference between real time and right time, and she used the real time to be a right time. So I think the tools, will definitely adjust as more people kind of embrace that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brian. And as a matter of fact, Foursquare is quite beneficial a lot to not only business people, but the job seekers, if they know how to use it correctly. But unfortunately, not that many people, the adoption is somewhat limited. So hopefully that will change. The other thing that you alluded to, and although it has to be more personal, but basically with regard to Facebook check-ins, and you saw with the power of that when you discovered that Tamara was in Las Vegas last night. So it has happened to me as well. So it's very, very powerful in that regard. But getting back to social selling, one of the things you want to make sure that you do is that the strategy that you employ includes both the inbound and outbound elements. And this is particularly relevant to LinkedIn, so that you have when your LinkedIn profiles here become an inbound marketing machine, and you use the tools such as the advanced search capabilities for outbound marketing purposes. So very, very effective in that regard. The other thing is I want to make sure that everything that you do with regard to social selling out there, that anything you do to attract people that you are authentic. You are who you say you are. And if they peel back the onion, that they're not going to uncover anything that's information that is erroneous. That what you have in your profiles are true and authentic and credible. And the other thing, finally, with regard to this, is don't go out with regard to social selling and try to game the system. No gaming of the social media channels or LinkedIn or whatever, so that you become you have a higher competitive position with regard to people doing keyword searches and that. Some people are still out there doing this in this day and age, but I think the buyers of in any particular area will see that, and they will discount you accordingly. So, just be genuine, authentic, and be true. Don't try to game the system out there. Hopefully, Rachel and Brian, you agree with that.
No, I agree with that. I had to switch technologies real quick because battery life on the laptop died, so I switched to my iPhone. So I think it's a great way of showing the power of technology.
Right.
I was wondering what happened there.
Yeah, gotta love it. We gotta do it somehow. So so I think that's a very valid point that we have to not only embrace them, but we also have to know how they work. We were talking to Jeff from one of the tools last week, and Jeff had a really good point on what percentage of the tools that we buy are we actually using the features that we have. Like there's such little features, and when you were talking about gamification or people not utilizing, I think oftentimes people try to take the shortcut, and I mean there's no mistaking it. There is zero easy button when it comes to being real on social and utilizing social selling, and the reason that is you can't create relationships or build trust with an easy button, and you can't do that on social either.
Wait, so I think someone's probably trying to develop that, Brian, right?
They probably are.
You're right. There's no easy button, and there will never be an easy button for developing relationships. So the other thing I'd advocate is you train everyone within your business of how to use the LinkedIn Advanced Search tools to help facilitate your overall social selling process. It's very, very important. Again, I'd just like to emphasize with regard to this section is that you want to have an integrated approach to your whole social selling process. That one size does not fit all, and you want to use this so that you create emails, mails, phone, face-to-face, and then you nurture it through content eventually. So, Rachel, do you want to go into question number 4 now?
I just had kind of a quick sub-question to what we were just talking about. I know LinkedIn heavily promotes itself as the social selling platform, and for many reasons, they are definitely a front runner. However, for me personally, I've had the greatest success on Twitter, because it suits my personality more. I agree with you that transparency and authenticity is incredibly important with social selling, and I find that people are a lot more candid on Twitter, and it definitely allows me to engage and showcase more of my personality more naturally. So I think that's why it's been successful for me. Do you think people should experiment with a variety of networks, or should they just dive into the top 2?
Without question. And I mean, the networks are going to be customer specific. One size does not fit all, as I said before. So you really need to experiment. It's all about testing what really makes sense for your prospects, your customers, and that accordingly. Don't neglect the existing tools.
I think, like you said, not only not neglect the existing tool, but because you're going to go or utilize a new tool, it doesn't mean that the tool